Hey, welcome. It's Brian, and this is Guitar Solo Reactions. Today is part two of the video that was shot with Brian from Yes You Can Play Guitar, where we talk about Prince, Prince's guitar playing, and his music. Thanks for joining us. And
Chris,
So,
actually, sorry, I got to ask you a question. I've been meaning to ask you this question for a long time, but when did get the home PC with internet capabilities? Like when did you start getting into the internet?
Uh, I would imagine it's about 92, 93. Like
Yeah,
because I had a 14K broadband, wasn't even broadband, it was a modem. So I was doing, the old form of bulletin
the
boards
BBS
and
boards and stuff.
text-based.
yeah.
Yeah.
But see, I
But I'm
think
a
right
I'm a
there,
geek, so
but I
yeah.
think right there, I got to the heart of something. Okay. Because I was late to the internet barbecue. I mean, when I was in college, I had to learn about modems and all that other stuff. I didn't get an actual PC with internet capability till '99. Where I think you were into that early, and I think that also and the BBS boards and all that stuff. So I think that's also helped nurture your knowledge about Prince and exposure to him those years before I had any access to that. Is that fair
Yeah,
to say?
and I think it's fair to say. I mean, obviously, it was always a resource, wasn't it? And it
Yeah,
was a technology that he was quite early to jump on and was quite innovative with. You know,
exactly.
at the turn of the late 90s into the early 2000s, he had a version of basically iTunes called the MPG Music Club, where you paid a subscription, and he would, in some instances, upload the song he'd worked on the day before.
Yeah.
So it was quite
Wow.
a fantastic thing. But those bulletin boards, uh, there was a news group concept where you would go on and you would filter down by subject. And I remember alt.music.prints and alt.binaries. Binaries was the like download equivalent. Dot music.prints. They were sort of staples where you would go and we would get the early bootlegs. And
Mhm.
this is something that when the internet came along, the internet proper with Netscape Navigator and the browser, it was able to be built upon because there was already this foundation of this is what the fans do and this is how we swap the music. So the advent of the internet basically is just the advent of bootlegging for me. This
Yeah.
is this is the Prince that I know more than the studio Prince.
Yeah, and you've shared a lot with me, and it's just I would never ever call you the ultimate Prince fan. I did it kind of tongue in cheek a while ago. We got some flack for that, but
Yeah,
I like it's just amazing the things you've shared with me, like your files and documentation and how. But I meant to ask you that for a long time because I think part of my ignorance with Prince was due to the fact that I was late to the internet barbecue. I did, as I said, '99 was when I got my first
mhm.
home PC with an actual, it was dial up, but I had that was my first actual exposure to having access to the internet.
Yeah, yeah. I think it would have been a totally different career that he had if we had something like the internet
Yeah,
around. Where could he have built that enigma that he nurtured so well
yeah,
if anyone could just throw a clip of him up at a restaurant or
yeah.
you know so it's an interesting alternate universe that we go into. um Brian with an I mentioned something at the very start where you said that you just bought a wah pedal
Yeah.
uh on the back of that. Have you tried to do any of the Prince playing or incorporate it into the playing that you do?
Not into my own playing, but for fun, I've been working on like five or six like pieces of music from Zappa, from Prince, like, and then do little soloette things over it for my own benefit, not for, I mean, I'll put them up, but yeah, I mean, I just kind of, that's a huge leap to try to do some of that music, and no matter how great you do it, I won't be doing it incredibly well. I'll be, but I also like to say, hey, this is where I'm at as a player, and like it or leave it, criticize me or whatever, but I'll put it out there, and or maybe I won't if I can't get it to that point. But as far as incorporating into the music I play, um yeah, I don't play, basically my stuff is kind of like a prog kind of thing. Um but I thought I just had to buy the wah just for fun because I was like, I try to buy like a piece of equipment, not original, but you know, something that like Prince used, or like Trey Anastasio or Tony Iommi or whatever. And it's not just for me, it's kind of like a collectible kind of fun
But
thing. But
Brian, you're talking about a wah pedal, not the whammy pedal, right?
no, just the wah pedal.
Okay,
So it's an
got it.
inductorless wah
Okay.
that Color Sound made. And so wahs have the inductor. I'm not sure how it's different, but it's just like it's got a really wide sweep. And I'm not sure the one he had, and I've talked to other people. I have a follower who's lives in Germany, showed me his whole setup, and he has like a Prince setup. And it's not like original, like to the, you know, not everything, but he sent me a bunch of clips of him doing stuff from The Undertaker, like the sounds, not the songs. And, you know, Prince was using that Zoom rack mount thing that had like a whammy pedal in it and stuff.
Yeah,
But it
yeah.
also had this weird wah sound in it. So I'm not sure exactly. I'm maybe the Solitary Adventure can kind of chime in. I'm not sure where he used the Color Sound wah, but after I heard that, there was one where the sweep was so wide. It reminded me of like another wah that I had, and I was like, well, I gotta
Morley?
buy one.
Was it Morley?
No. It was that Tycho Brahe, that Iron Bell that Tony
Okay.
Iommi used like in the late 80s or 70s. Super weird wide sweep. Anyway, I haven't even I bought it from Macari's in England, and I haven't even opened the box yet. I'm almost afraid to.
Yeah.
I don't know
But
why.
but with his regular wah, when he would just use it, I don't know. You know, again, too, like, you know, I have a growing YouTube channel. I do get a lot of correspondence from people sending me stuff, sending me print stuff, whatever. I've always been a Dunlop guy. You know, I know a Morley seems to have a little bit more sweep than a Dunlop, but I'm not sure what the actual brand of regular wah that he would use back in the day. Was it a
He
Dunlop?
I think so. He also had this thing. It looked like this Ibanez Voodoo Wah or something. He had this weird big pedal. Now I've looked at as many pictures of his pedal board as I could, and I don't think I'm correct, but you do see the Color Sound occasionally. And then he was using the whammy pedal, but during that Undertaker, he was using this Zoom rack mount with a pedal, like a, you know, to do the wah sound or the pitch bend or whatever the type stuff. And it's
When
wild. I mean,
when he used the whammy pedal, and I was like, holy, that's a Dunlop whammy pedal that he's using. Dunlop or Digitech?
Digitech.
Digitech, yeah, sorry. That blew me away. I thought that was progressive. Like, it's not something you'd see like a lot of blues or funk players use. You know, the most famous user in my memory would be Dimebag Darrell from Pantera.
Yeah.
Right? Of course, again, his memorial. He was murdered the same day, on the same date, not the same year, but the same date. Just it was December 8th. He was shot on stage too. I don't know if the Solitary Adventure knows about that story, but that was something. But anyway, that blew me away. I'm like, man, he's using a whammy pedal. Like, this guy was kind of ahead of his time with a lot of, and he was very unique. That I remember being very, very surprised at that.
I often comment because, you know, he uses basically just the Boss standard pedals like the flanger, the delay, the blues driver, the super distortion. And the flanger, you know, when he hits it at the end of a song and it's that kind of swirling.
He likes that dynamic,
It's his thing. And I always get a huge kick out of that. But like, he gets a massive sound. Those pedals are not my favorite as far as that kind of stuff. But what I will say though is he takes them and they're indestructible. But yet he kind of pulled out stuff out of them that I would think most people wouldn't be able to do. Like a really great, big, massive sound without it being too bright, or, you know, all of those things you get like with a lot of Boss stuff that, yes, it's great at certain things, but there's just like the distortion stuff, not so much.
Yeah.
So
when we talked with Susan Rogers, she told us a story about the guy at the time with who's designing the big guitars. I'm, you know, if I was a betting man, I'd bet that it was Bob Bradshaw, because he was the one at that time was the big name, and he was designing that, $10,000 Bradshaw switching racks and stuff. They hired him to come in and get it all set up or something and get it working. And Prince, like, what did she say? He like just looked at it, stepped at a couple things, and put his guitar
I
down
think
and
he,
walked out of the room or something.
yeah, I mean, the guy had spent all day putting this thing together, and then Prince came in. He said, "Oh," played a couple of notes, and then said something like, "And what happens when I want to change to, a funk sound, in the middle of playing?" And the guy was like, "No, you program in the sequence that you want and how long it lasts." And he just took the guitar off, handed it over, walked out, told someone, "Get rid of him, send him home," because he was in the moment. He was never going to do it to rote.
Yeah. And Scotty Baldwin told us something too. He said that Prince was okay with technology, but if it got to the point where he was overwhelmed,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the specific things I remember Scotty telling us. But yeah.
And I think as a fan, it's probably not the worst thing in the world that he was reluctant to change too far from what he knew, his tool set, because I can pick any song from the career, and his voice didn't really leave him towards the end. His playing style evolved. He got more proficient in certain ways. Where I can pick a song from 2011, I can throw it on an album from 1983, and the only thing that's really different is the production, spend on it, that they're not produced in the same way. So I've got one final question on Prince, before we cover some other bits and pieces. But I suppose it's interesting to me, for me, to see that you guys are doing these reactions. And I feel if it was me doing the reactions, I'd want to go straight down the rabbit hole of listening to all of the studio material.
Yeah.
I understand that you can't necessarily do that. Have you, obviously Brian with an I has got some history of listening to the late 80s albums, but what's your feeling on going into a studio catalog that is 40 albums deep? Whoever
Well,
wants to take that first.
yeah, I have not done that. I mean, I'd like to. It's kind of one of these things, like you do these videos, Brian can contest or attest to this as well. And I watch a lot of stuff. So I'm watching all these bootlegs that come out that like we're all watching, and try to discover new things. And I'm always excited if I do something that someone's like, wow, I never heard that version, or him even doing that. And I was like, so that's kind of fun. But as far as like listening, I don't listen to anything I do on the channel, on my channel. I mean, I listen to basically extreme metal most of the time, and I go to throwbacks to like fusion or like classic rock, but I mostly listen to pretty like extreme metal.
Well, when you say that, who do you mean? Are we talking about Deicide or like?
Not like Blood Incantation.
Okay.
I'm into a lot of black metal and atmospheric black metal.
Okay. I wouldn't have guessed that, Brian. I
mean,
never
I grew up listening, like I said, as a kid, I was listening to, I loved all guitar, but it was mostly like 80s hair, like Scorpions, Rat, and that kind of stuff. I'm a little old for that, but I quickly got out of that. And I still love Black Sabbath, my favorite band of all time. Listen to that a lot. But I kind of went into more guitar stuff. And what we were talking about Prince's like rhythm work, I got into funk playing because like listening to Jeff Beck on Blow by Blow. I forget what it is, like Constipated Duck or something. There's some song where he's doing some great line that's like a funk line. And I was like, wow. And then I went into Parliament, really got into funk players and all of that. And Prince didn't really figure into that. I'm not sure. I think it was literally, like I said, when Doves Cry, hearing that intro. And I was going to say maybe, I think it was because of MTV. Like that's why I know who Prince is, to be honest. Like that was the origin for me. And it's Doves Cry, and then probably Purple Rain. And yeah, just remember that being like, wow, that's a killer guitar sound. And for me, like I've said, I've always tried to look for the most adventurous player. And it's not always like an extreme thing. But when I heard Prince, and I was like, wow, that's someone that is interesting to me. And I probably never took it any further than that till I met this girl in like late 80s. And then it was Sign of the Times. So,
you know, one thing I'd like to say, as we're kind of winding this topic down, I've morphed with these Prince reaction videos. You know, I still do them, but I'm really getting into our interviews. You know, you and I together collectively, and also me separately, like done some interviews with some really interesting people in the music. So it kind of morphed for me about just Prince. Oh, guitar. Let's watch him play guitar in the Hall of Fame. But it kind of morphed because then he's not a normal person. You know, like he has this rich history, all these characters in his background that have come and go from bands, you know, management, sound. But it's kind of more for me now. Like I'm more of the inside kind of thinking. Like I'll watch now, and when we talked to Scotty, it was just amazing. It wasn't just amazing talking to him, but it was hearing the two of you talk was amazing. But I look at it now as a performer who has worked for some slave drivers, and maybe some people would say when they worked for me, I was somewhat of a slave driver. I don't know. I had my expectations of people when they're being paid to perform, but there's a lot of times like I'll with Prince, I'll be like, what was he like to work with? I figured out very quickly he would have been very demanding. Right? Sometimes I'll put myself in that. You know, he would have hated my funk playing anyway. He just would have put the guitar down and left the room if I started playing funk. But if I was playing for him, often I would think, what would it have been like? Like, there's just something so fascinating I find about him than I do with a lot of other artists and bands out there. There's just more depth with him. As I said, you could pick another band. Let's even say like Metallica. You know, that they just came out, announced this new world tour. Their biggest VIP package is $7,200 US. You know, I did a video about it. You know, Metallica will always have a special place in my heart. But if someone got into Metallica and they did some research, within a few weeks, you could probably find out and kind of learn everything you needed to know about them, their history, their background. Prince, it never ends. And then I get into the Morris Day and the Time, and I'm like, now I got to learn about these guys. So that whole Minneapolis thing, it's I think it's just an ongoing study. I made a joke a while ago. It might have been during a Patreon chat where I said, you know, my education on Prince now I'm at grade 2.
Yeah.
But often I'll think, what was he like to work for? What was it like behind the scenes working for him? Sometimes that tends to preoccupy me. And when I do my reactions, there's times I get so into what he's doing and I get thinking about so much that I'm like, I realize, oh my God, the camera, the red light's on. Okay, yeah. So anyway, that's a compliment. I get really into watching some of those videos that I kind of forget where I'm at, you know. It's kind of like the National Geographic photographer. He's filming the lion running at him.
Yeah.
And then he kind of goes, wait a second.
There's a lion running at me.
Exactly. Just wanted to throw that in too.
Yeah, I often marvel at the lifestyle that came with being a band member.
Yeah.
You know, this lack of sleep, the incessant rehearsals, then, you know, we'll do a gig, we'll do an after show. I mean, I wouldn't say he owned people, but he certainly got his money's worth on an hourly basis from what he was paying them. But it speaks to me at the sort of level of musician that he had, that these guys were able to do it on, you know, 3 hours sleep.
Yeah.
At the drop of a hat, he could hit them with On the One and solo from, you know, whoever it might be. So I think it would have been a real test, I think, for anyone, you know, and I understand why they refer to it as like the sort of the Paisley University. You know, I don't need qualifications. I went through Paisley Park.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I
think, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think, yes, he was probably very dictatorial and maybe even brutal. But if you're like that and there's no good side, or, you know, not even like, I think it'd probably be if you either made it or you didn't. Like, there's no like in between. Like, so I think he would have driven you really hard. And I think that makes you either rise up to it and then, you know, you get the reward of that. But he had to have great qualities otherwise too, to keep you coming. Because, you know, I just think you would move on. Like you do your, you know, like a Frank Zappa thing. You do a year, say, hey, I was in the Frank Zappa band, and you move on, you know, because you can only do it for so long. But a lot of those people were in Prince's band for a long time, And
Yeah.
doing all those shows, 3 hours is insane. And then doing an after-hour show for a couple hours,
Yeah.
and then waking up and doing it all over again is just
Oh yeah.
unfathomable for me.
And the big question too is, yes, it would be great to say on your musical resume, say, yeah, I played for Prince. But if a potential new employer contacted Prince for a reference on you, would he give you a good one?
Yeah.
For a good referral? That's another question. I'm kind of off the wall with the thoughts that go through my head about it.
It'd be interesting if we get to speak to a band member. You know, did they ever find out that they got a call from behind the scenes? You know, the reference idea. It would be interesting.
Very much
I
so,
find
yeah.
yeah, that sort of that sheer work ethic is what keeps me entertained, because you know, all the studio albums, I kind of know them like the back of my hand now.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you know, the bootleg side of things keeps it interesting, but this chronology of, you know, he literally just gave every single day of his life to trying to create something new and perfect the craft
Yeah.
is just amazing to me.
I wanted to say too, because we talked about it with Brian a little bit, but I had an interesting post. One of the things I always tried to do when I started my channel was answer every comment. But then as your channel grows, you know, our good friend Mark, he told me months ago, he said, dude, like some days I would spend 3 hours in the morning trying to, he just said, dude, you're going to get to that point. But so I'm a little more selective sometimes from the ones I'll answer, but I got one from my good friend Sean Gill, I think was his name. I know he'd been kind of watching my channel for a while. Maybe he might watch Brian's. He's a Prince fan. He said, you know, you do the Prince reaction for the views. But then he said in it, he said, I don't understand how you couldn't just be obsessed with listening and going through his back catalog because he's such a talent. So, you know, I find this is kind of hollow what you're doing, and I don't know if I'm going to watch anymore or something. And I wrote him back. I said, I thank you for posting, but I said, you're actually wrong. You know, I didn't get into it with him. But you and I discussed this. So I did buy a couple of the best of Prince albums. I listen to them sometimes. You know, I tend to listen to more of my music when I'm at the gym or doing my cardio. But the problem is if you do a legitimate reaction, but you've already heard it, it's not legitimate anymore.
Yeah.
So I'm in a weird spot sometimes. It's like, you know, like there's a lot I would like to do, but I can't because again, it's about being honest with people. Like there's some reaction videos I'm sure that are contrived, but I don't want to be like that. So I have to, once I've seen the song and I've done a reaction to it, then I can allow myself to enjoy it and listen to it again, whatever. But I have to be very careful. I'm treading a careful line with that. So Sean, I appreciate you posting, but that's not really accurate what you were saying.
Yeah, I think if we carry on down the interview route, though, there'll be certain people where it's almost part of the prep work, isn't it, to go listen to a certain drummer and that kind of stuff.
It's going to have to be at some point, yeah.
I wonder if there's a nice middle ground that can be met there, where, you know, you maybe film the reaction to the listen to the prep.
There's that too.
It's like you double up on the output.
Yeah.
So I think, you know, unless anyone's got anything else to say about Prince, I think we've spoken quite a lot about him. So the other,
I would like to say one other thing. Sorry, not to interrupt
sure.
you.
No.
But I was like, I think it's so great. This is the part that I personally enjoy, is that, like we're saying, I've met people from all over the world, and now talking to them, you know, live or, you know, via Zoom. And I think that's kind of the coolest thing ever that I would have never expected. And I talk to people on the phone, not the Prince end of things, but other things I do. And I think it is, when you're talking about earlier about like what brought you to us, Solitary Traveler, is adventure, whatever, sorry. But is that a Prince? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
I'd rather call you by your name, but I'm not sure we're supposed to. But you know, so we're all here talking about this, and that is such a cool thing that it's kind of mind-blowing. And you know, it's, even if it's 3 or 4 people, it's just, anyway, it's just not what I ever thought it would be. It was my hope, but you know,
I think it's something that I see a lot with Prince fans, is that it almost becomes like a belief system that you have to indoctrinate everyone around you that Prince is the greatest artist who ever lived, and you should know this too. And I've mellowed a lot in that, in the, the last like 10 or 15 years, where it's not for me to say, because I also think the age that you come to music has a lot. Like the music during sort of adolescence is the music that probably means the most to you for your whole life. And I think everyone goes through that. So if you're, in a different stage of life, and then you come across Prince, you can't dedicate the, 150 hours that it might take to go down the rabbit hole. So I've mellowed, but also I try not to listen to a lot of Prince music these days, which might take people by surprise, because if all I did was listen to Prince, I'd have no yardstick. I would have no judgment.
Yeah.
And I need to hear what other people did, and the people who, maybe I miss them. So I go back and I go through their back catalogue. Like I went through Bowie's after he died. I don't get it. I picked maybe 11, 12 songs out where I thought, okay, there's something re-listenable in that. But a lot of it just went over my head because I hadn't hit it at the right age. I hadn't absorbed it in the right way, where it was maybe getting released and I could take a month, 2 months re-listening over and over to the albums. But I get it. But it seems to be something unique with Prince people. Maybe it's the makeup of every concert that we went to. It was every size, every color, every gender. Everyone was there, and the common denominator took away all the differences, that we were just there for a Prince show. And I think that comes across, that people want people to get on board. We're on this great train. Why don't you jump on with us?
Well, what I'll say about Prince fans is but everyone has been really generous and thoughtful, like on the other ends of things, because both Brian and I mean, I'm here for guitar players. Like that's the crux of my thing. Like I'm going to talk about great players that are new to me or old to me or whatever. But I have other kind of segments of my subscribers that are not as gregarious or not as nice about it, or they're like more like, wow, you should do this and this, a lot of demands. And it's kind of funny that this is the other part about doing this, is like, I never thought there'd be all this pressure to try to keep everyone happy, or try, which is obviously impossible. You cannot.
It is. Yeah, believe me, I learned that. And so really, for the most part, 9 out of 10 times, I try to keep my reactions to my Patreons. So if they're in my Patreon, I'm gonna. But even with my Patreon, sometimes I get, if people are sending me lists of 30 songs, it's like, dude, like it's one man show here. I don't have a production crew like Rick Beato.
Yeah.
But you'll get that, and then you'll get emails from people sending you lists of, you should react to this. Sometimes 20, 30 in an email, and you're like, it's not that I don't like you or I don't appreciate that you took a half an hour to write me. Yeah. I can't. There's only so many hours in the day that maybe for some people where they can make, who do happen to make the switch, where they have a few 100,000 subscribers and they make their living full time from YouTube, maybe. But you just do the best you can. But I find it's again, Solitary Adventure has been a great friend. I always. Yeah. When I was younger, I thought I knew everything. Now I don't think I know everything. Sometimes he's one of the people that I trust to bounce an idea or a concept off of and say, "What do you think?" Or maybe should I do this? Or, but yeah, you're going to find, and as your channel continues to grow, you're not going to be able to keep everybody happy.
Well, I know that already, and I mean, I guess when I started doing it, it was like with no real big intent, and then it gets a little bit bigger, and then I did realize the hard way, like I was doing weeks of like Prince's Week. Actually, that was really fun. I did like whatever, maybe 14, like 2 a day. That's absurd. Like, and everyone's like, you can't do that. And I was like, I'm gonna try because I have the time and I want to do it. But that has not led to, I guess, why I'm not doing it for no reason, because I want to get more subscribers, I guess. And my whole intent was to do this where maybe you get some equipment to try out. Like I really wanted to do demos at first. I don't think that's very, on the horizon for me, but I thought there'd be some benefits to doing this. And the benefits turned out to be, like I said, different. It's more like relationship driven or that kind of stuff, not like, you know, you get to the point where someone says, hey, try my guitar out and give it a, you know, let me know what you think of it, kind of thing. And that just takes a whole nother level of production that
Yeah.
I am
But
not able to do.
no, and you know, I was when I had my interview with Rob Arnold from Camara last week. He has a really good YouTube channel. You know, his band you know, they hit a certain peak.
Yeah.
They were touring with Slayer and stuff, but then they kind of imploded and the whole thing. But he told me, he said, when I got into YouTube just in the past couple of years, I think partially because of the pandemic,
Yeah.
people had time on their hands. You know, people might have been getting you know, like government benefits because they couldn't work. Like, so like, well, what am I going to do? Well, people then had the time to take on the learning curve of YouTube, learning about production. He said the problem is the production standard is so high now. Like, Brian, if you had your channel 10 years ago, you'd probably already be at 70,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's just, it's an interesting thing about YouTube. But the thing is, I'll keep doing it as long as I love it.
Yeah.
My big thing this year is I've been sick. And my Patreons and my, like, this has been the most bizarre, without getting a conspiracy theories about being sick. And I remember where I live, there's always something that throws a wrench into it. You know, I was trying to make a reaction video today to something. I forgot to press record yesterday, so I tried to redo it today, and then the battery ran out. And I'm like, oh my God. But back in April, you know, I'm here working, right? You know, and I look out one day, there's 30 construction workers out there. You know, for 3 months, I had backhoes, dump trucks, steamrollers, 30 people walking by the window because they were redoing the water mains and ripping up the main road. So I'm like, what am I going to do? I'm going to have to shoot all my videos on the weekend and at night now. Like,
Yeah.
there's always, and I said that in my what did I learn my 1 year of YouTube video. You're going to have curveballs. You know, it's a really interesting thing. But what makes it all worthwhile to me is, you're right, I met some amazing people. Like, Rusty Cooley is one of my favorite guitar players. If someone would have told me 2 years ago, you'll have a YouTube channel and you'll be interviewing Rusty Cooley and you're going to be texting each other, I would have laughed my ass off.
Yeah.
You know, like, I've met wonderful people. I've met Chris. I have a really awesome Patreon family. And even beyond Patreon, and just the people in the comments or the emails I get. I've had some people say, hey, you know what, man, I'm going through a really shitty time, but your channel really makes me laugh, or I really enjoy what you do. And you're like, wow, this person's from like South Africa. This is really weird.
Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had one other question, which was just the other crossover, which is Polyphia and Elite Batar, of both videos that you've covered. Any sort of observation on when a new artist suddenly comes to you and then you see this reaction from the comment section?
Well, with Polyphia, I've known about him for a long time, but I was like, you know, I was just like, if you're going to do a guitar-driven channel, those two guys, Tim and Scott, are like driving guitar players now, like kids that are 14 or whatever are seeing them and they're like, but that sucks for us older guys that, you know, you get woodshed for a long time and not be as good as them. So now the internet has pushed the advancement of technique on guitar and probably all other instruments through the ceiling. But I'm like, you have to have them. And I like their concept. Again, that's not something I would listen to in my car per se, but I love checking it out and all of that. And I just, the Elite Bata, like someone suggested that a few times, and I saw that Brian did it, and I was like, I didn't really know what I was getting into a little bit. And I did it, and obviously that like doubled my channel, like in a couple of days. But I kind of, with that kind of thing, with Polyphia and like some like that new Metallica song, I did that. I try to do some of those things that maybe it catches a wave and, you know, you grow a little bit and, you know, you attract people that are going to like it more. That has not kind of panned out. The Polyphia, yes, but like Metallica and you know, I'm trying to think of some of those other like Jason Richardson, these kind of hotshot guitar players. Nobody watches them. So I basically took down about 200 videos that nobody watched, you know, because I was like, if they've got a couple hundred views at this point, you know, I'm just taking them down. So,
wow.
But I love Polyphia. That's definitely one of those bands that I'm excited about to see what they do next. So from a guitar player.
And is there anyone else that you're thinking of going down the rabbit hole video wise?
Well, I saw this other really like this Indonesian kid. I forget his name. I just saw
Bim Finger.
Yes. And he's
Amazing.
killer.
Holy
Like that
shite.
guy is like amazing.
Yeah.
Touch wise, feeling wise, and the music holds up. And it's definitely, I'm not a Dream Theater like technical metal guy per se. I love guitar, but just musically, it's not exciting to me. But I'm interested to do. He does a version of Fred, which is a Tony Williams song that Alan Holdsworth was on. So I was going to do that or something, and he seems good. And yeah, that's kind of led me down a few places where I wouldn't normally have gone. And yeah, there's a few others, but I can't. I just kind of discovered them in the last week for myself.
Yeah, I want to say first and foremost, Indonesian people that they're very passionate about the country, and they're very passionate. And I have to say they've been extremely kind to me.
Yeah.
I could never say enough. Like, I've never been on a plane before, but I'm almost at that point. I would go on a plane to play a gig in Indonesia. And I did do a reaction to that. A Bim Finger. I had a number of people saying, "Oh, you got to check this," and he's coming from a bit more of my school guitar playing.
Yeah.
Amazing guitar player. And again, a young kid. You're looking at like Polyphia. I was a little out of the loop when I was in a different industry for a few years, but they are amazing. They're incredible guitar players. Tim Henson and everything. There was another band about 10 years ago that came out called Animals as Leaders. The guitar player Tosin Obazi, amazing technical guitar player. Another band was called Periphery. Yeah. They're amazing bands. Like, but would I buy their CD or would I buy their stuff and listen to it for enjoyment? I'm weird because I'm a technique guy, but I like the technique within the context of a good song. I always say a good guitar solo is telling a good story within a good story. So people might say, like, what are you talking about? Like, what would be a good example of that? The band Testament, Alex Skolnick is one of my favorite guitar players. Check out the song Electric Crown. It's a really catchy song with a great guitar solo. I like Zakk Wylde. I like some people might say Zakk Wylde has a few trick pony, but I think he's a great guitar player. Like Randy Rhoads, listen to the guitar solo in Mr. Crowley. So I like a good technical guitar solo, but it tells a great story within a great story. Some of the songs, like Dream Theater is a very interesting band for me. I'm hoping at some point to interview John Petrucci. I might have an insight to do that. They kind of lost me after they had Images and Words, and then they had Awake, and then they started kind of losing me. The song is still the most important thing, right? Like, yes, the guitar solo in Purple Rain is phenomenal, but Purple Rain is a phenomenal song. But when you have a band and then the songs are kind of getting sacrificed, and then you go just stop and you go into this really technical part just for the sake of being technical, it kind of, Another band I really like too is Symphony X with Michael Romeo. Like, he's an amazing guitar player, but if you listen to the Divine Wings of Tragedy, they're cool songs with cool guitar solos in them. But technique for just the sake of technique. So there's sometimes one guitar player I have a love-hate relationship with is Al Di Meola. I love the guitar trio, but it's that constant, when I'm really in shape, I have, some would argue, really exceptional alternate picking. Not comparing myself to Al Di Meola, but when you're just blasting that all the time, sometimes Yngwie Malmsteen's like that. I'm like, it's an ingredient when you're cooking. Throw in a little bit of alternate picking, throw in a fast lick. But still, what's the song like? Is it a good song? You guys talk a lot about Jeff Beck. Jeff Beck's amazing. My favorite song from Jeff Beck is a song called, I think it's called Badia, because it takes you on this crazy journey. Yeah. If you know the song I'm talking about, you're listening to it going, man, that is one of those amazing. He's playing that on guitar. Like, that's one of the most amazing songs I've ever heard. So I'm kind of weird that way, but Polyphia are awesome. I love listening to them. Would I go out and buy them or go see them in concert? Don't know.
I probably wouldn't. I mean, Tosin, I knew about him a long time ago, and that's the stuff that, it just does. It leaves me like, I love the drummers in those bands. In Polyphia, like Clay, the drummer. I mean, they're like, I think the drummers in metal are like the classical musicians of you know, the 50s as far as technique, like just
Yeah.
they're like athletes basically. But
Yeah.
I was gonna mention Al Di Meola, about a guy who never makes a mistake. I'm a huge fan of him and
Yeah.
seen him a couple of times, and I always think, you know, he thinks melodically all the time, but yeah, it gets kind of old or whatever. But yeah, I mean, but like these younger things, like this kind of metal adjacent stuff is what I would call like Tosin and Pliny, all of this stuff. Amazing musicians, but I'm not necessarily going to listen to it because, like what you were saying earlier, Chris, I'd be more likely to listen to Black Sabbath, like the record Sabbath, Volume 4, like for the 8 millionth time, and love it like I did, 30 years ago. So, yeah.
One of the bands that I like that I've done recently was I did a few with the Skull Collector. He's a Patreon. He's a metalhead. He's one of the few metalheads in our Patreon community. Seven Spires. I thought they were quite interesting to listen and watch them. The singer, the whole band was amazing. But you'll notice in my reaction videos, right, Chris? What do I always look at, even more so than the guitar? What's the drummer like? What's the drummer like? And the drums is the backbone. And I had a hope of doing something for fun, like a little project around here. It's really weird because we live out in the middle of nowhere, and just 2 houses down is this guy who's become my friend. I did a cover song a year ago for Aha's Take On Me, but it's more of a metal shred thing. But he mastered it for me. He's got a big production company with the lighting and sound. It's so weird. But I said, I miss playing. I wish I could, but to find a good drummer, I would never. I've been in situations where you play with a drummer that's not very good and it sucks. I would never ever put myself through that.
So I'm going to come out with a final question, then we'll go towards wrapping things up.
Yeah.
Brian with an I very quickly was out the blocks with Prince's best lineup, John Blackwell, and I didn't want to interrupt at the time, but I do want to ask the question of all the lineups that you guys have seen now through these videos. Do you have maybe not a lineup, but what's your ideal combination of players that worked with Prince?
That I would say, I don't know. I love Larry Graham playing bass with Prince, but that was just kind of an occasional thing, I think, right? But
he was in the camp for a long time. He was on several of the tours.
Okay.
But yeah, he's not. I mean, he kind of overlaps a lot with Rhonda,
Right. So I would say Rhonda, and then John Blackwell is a drummer. And I mean, I like the Three-Eyed Girl stuff. I mean, I made that pretty clear. Like, I think at times I thought, I thought they were my favorite. But what that really means is because they were so stripped down. It was like, 2 guitars, bass, and drums. And I don't know, did they have keyboards ever? They might have.
Towards the end, yeah, Cassandra O'Neill got sort of recruited in because Prince would always get bored with an idea. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I just like the idea with him with like minimal people was so cool. And he was really at the end there concentrating on playing guitar. Like that was more of a forefront thing. And, he couldn't do all the moves and all the dancing and stuff, maybe, or whatever it was. Maybe it was just the physical thing that he decided to stand more still and play more guitar. And I don't know if that's true, but that's what it seems like. And I love that period of his playing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that is true. He certainly had a great way of putting forward one of his talents, so that you didn't realize that another talent had taken a backseat. And I think his transition around 2000, where suddenly he was playing a lot of the lead guitar himself with no foil, was certainly a way that he could cover up the fact that maybe he wasn't able to do the splits and do the dancing. If you could cherry pick any band members, what would your drums, bass, alternate guitarist, keyboardist, is that something that you would be comfortable cherry picking
for Prince, like as the ultimate lineup? Well, like I said,
obviously with him as the lead.
Yeah, I would say like Rhonda and John Blackwell and him, and that's it.
Okay.
I mean, maybe How do you say the keyboard? Renato?
Renato.
Yeah,
Renato.
he
Yeah.
was amazing. But
Mm.
so I guess if I had to, I'd throw him in because he was technically great. And Maceo, as cool as he is, like he's like from that old school of like James Brown and stuff. It's like uh I don't know. I just like him stripped down like that. Like, the horn section stuff was always cool. I just
Mhm.
I just love him playing guitar, and
Yeah.
anything that gets in the way of that is, I don't know. It just doesn't seem necessary when you're that amazing. So
Yeah.
For
I won't
me,
disagree with that.
yeah, the Montreux lineup for me is number one for those Montreux shows that he had. So it was Blackwell on drums, Renato on keyboards. And then for me, it was the 94-ish, 95-ish lineup, Michael Bland on drums.
Oh
I
yeah.
like that lineup. And then I also like Third Eye Girl. They'd probably be my third.
Mhm.
When we say cherry picking, being from Canada, that means something different. It's a hockey term. But a little bit of Canadian humor in there. Okay. Anyway,
Have
moving
I
along.
said something inappropriate inadvertently to all the Canucks out there?
No. There was a guitar player I really liked, and you know me with names. And I got to ask you guys, I don't know if it's an age thing, because I used to be very good with names and dates and all that. It's kind of like eyesight or something. Like the past few years, I have to start using reading glasses and
Yeah.
noticing I'm depending on them more and more. I don't know, man. It's yeah. But there was a guitar player, early 90s. They were trying, it was kind of like, it must have been around when Can't Touch This. God, what was his name that did that? MC Hammer. It was kind of in that time frame, and that some guy came out was rapping, and I was kind of like, what is this? But there's another guitar player, and he played an Ibanez. It was a 540. It was a Sabre model.
So I think it's Levi Seacher.
Yes, I think you're right.
Yeah, so that
Actually,
early
if
90s
you're talking about Prince,
period.
I don't argue. I just say okay.
Well, I think so because he was the bass player in the late 80s, and there was a guy called Miko Weaver doing guitar, a really, very, very good guitarist.
Yeah.
But Levi was originally a guitar player and was only
Yeah.
playing bass because he was asked to.
He was quite
He
good.
then he graduated into guitar in the 90s and was able to, show his full talents. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesse Johnson was a wicked guitar player too. I know this ticked off a few people, but I'd say that like the Revolution were my least favorite out of all the lineups musically. I know
Mhm.
it's probably I'll probably get some death threats in my email now, but just being honest,
You
folks.
both will.
Yeah.
That's why I stay anonymous. You both will. I think it's a real hard one for me to square that circle these days because I understand that all of the commercial peak and all of the reason why so many people are Prince fans is because the Revolution was that band on that journey. That treadmill analogy that I used. I get that. But I look at, the mid 90s, Michael B and Sonny, and I just think it's not even the same game. If this is like, the Harlem Globetrotters versus, someone let's just put it politely.
Yeah.
I don't see them as I think they were very good and they were very rehearsed. But for me, what I want out of a group of musicians is if I say take a solo, you're able to do that in the moment. It's not something you've pre-rehearsed. And I think there's probably only one of the Revolution who was actually capable of doing that. That's probably Lisa.
Yeah.
But if you look at any of the bands after that, every band member was capable of taking a solo, and that to me is the big thing. I would push back slightly maybe on Donna Grantis, Third Eye Girl. I think she was a little bit of a throwback of she learned what worked, and she was quite rough around the edges at the start, and you could see that Prince had really rehearsed the life out of that band.
Yeah.
But everybody in between, stellar players on their
Yeah.
instruments. They were just masters.
And I want to mention too, like, if I could go back in time, or if Prince was still alive, you know what I would love to do? I really, we've chatted with amazing people. but I really loved our chat with Scotty Baldwin. What would I give to say, if especially after we talked to him, say, Scotty, I'm going to be, I'll be security for you. I'll make sure everyone leaves you alone. But just to stand there and watch you work, because I have my own interest and my experience in doing live sound. That would have been masterful watching him, or even getting like a GoPro footage of him just working the board. That what I would give to see that.
Well, I think we need to put our heads together and see what we can get on the bill for the Prince Celebration Week next year. Because Susan Rogers, she talked about wanting to work the board with some of the tapes that she'd, partaken in.
Yeah.
Scotty again with the live stuff. He will run sound for a lot of the PRN alumni. So I think that week, if we could push, there's a real chance that we could all get our wishes. You could see Scotty do live sound. I could see
I love that. Yeah.
Susan bring up a lot of the boot, the tapes of one of the unreleased songs. Yeah.
No, absolutely.
So final question for me is, what's next for each of your channels? What the trajectory that you're hoping for and the journey?
As it grows, it's kind of scary actually, because I'm not sure, like we're saying, all this pressure to get better at production and do stuff and do less. So production gets better as you do less, I think, obviously. So I want to get better at the things that count, which is the content and being able to deliver it and letting my personality come through, or that kind of thing. That's what's engaging. And so that's the challenge for me, is to kind of get that going, and then everything else will follow. And just doing more reactions. I would say I didn't start doing reactions. I just thought, nobody's watching these other things I'm doing. I'll give that a shot, and kind of blossomed into that. And so I think I'll continue doing that, obviously, but I'll probably start to interject more, maybe guitar playing stuff into it. That's kind of my hope for next year.
And you mentioned wanting some equipment to sort of come your way. Is there anything specifically, if there's anyone
better
listening?
Camera.
Okay.
But that this is the thing. It's like you have to, as a YouTube person, it's like you have to be your own production person, like your director, writer. And I'm not an organized person, so I'm not going to write a script. I know some people write scripts and all of this stuff, and some are great at the editing. Editing's, whatever. But like every notch is another thing. And so I think a camera would go a long way, is to answer your question. But that just opens a whole nother can of.
It does, yeah.
Yeah.
So slightly afraid of that.
Brian, you've said a number of really interesting things. So we've kind of had a lot of interesting parallels in the journey. One of the things, and I know I've said to the Solitary Adventurer several times in our personal chats, I've said I haven't found myself on YouTube yet. I have, I kind of played it safe the first while. I kind of played by the rules, but although still being honest and forthright, but there is a very amped up cartoon character version of me. The other side of my personality, and that personality is going to come out more in the new year. We talked about reaction requests. If you went through all the comments that have been posted on my channel in 2022, I could spend the next 15 years recording and editing. I would never get through. I could never do them all. So again, I try to keep my reactions to my Patreons, and even that is hard to do sometimes. So I think we'll be doing some more. We'll do weekly polls, and the patrons can vote to see what they want me to react to or whatever. Once in a blue moon, someone in the comments will throw something very unusual at me that I'll acknowledge and do a reaction to, or there might be something particular interest to me. But I really enjoy the interviews. I'm hoping to do many more with the Solitary Adventurer, because that rabbit hole, now the Prince thing with the reactions is great, but going down this rabbit hole of actually meeting via Zoom all these interesting people from the Prince background, also my own, like I'm a metal guy, so I'm interviewing. I interviewed Dave Ellison for Megadeth. I've interviewed Rusty Cooley, different people. But that rabbit hole is I want to kind of still do the reactions, but more go down the rabbit hole of the interviews. And maybe it's my own personal dream, but I'm hoping down the road I could go to Paisley Park and maybe do some interviews in person. I don't know. I know Chris has done a lot of traveling, but it would be great to meet him. Maybe I'd be over in England. Maybe we would be interviewing some famous people in Liverpool. Who knows where the road's going to take us? But you know, finding yourself on YouTube, yeah, it takes time, and I think, you know, my humor is a little different. You know, it's not for everybody, but the people that get it, they get it, and they find it. But I find it's starting to come out a little bit more. But my actual personality, usually when I have a lot of caffeine or pre-work into me, really starts to come out, that amped up version. There's going to be a lot more of that next year. But as far as production, yeah, it's a rabbit hole too, because so my one camera, it's for my A shot. My other camera, it's for my B shot, and now I'm going to be getting another camera, hopefully, for a C shot. So it's kind of like it just keeps growing or whatever. I'm actually hoping this time next year that I can afford to have like an assistant. You know what I mean? Like someone, a little bit of a production assistant, someone to help me along those lines as well, because that would really help. And there's so much that people don't see if they don't do YouTube. They don't know. Like, you know, I've got 5 portable hard drives plugged into the PC. You know, I have so many that need to be cataloged, edited. I need someone like the Solitary Adventurer to come work for me on weekends where they just catalog videos and screenshots and pictures and thumbnails. When it's disorganized, it drives me crazy, but it's, you know, I could spend a week just doing that on my portable hard drives with all the video I've accumulated.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to speak for the audience of both channels. If you're subscribed to one of these guys and not the other, fix that.
Absolutely,
Subscriptions for both. Thank you so much for your time. It's been fantastic to have both of you.
And I want to say to Chris
on Prince.
Yeah, I want to say to Chris, I'm not going to speak for Brian, but I'll speak for myself. Chris has always been kind, generous with his time. He's been I don't think my channel would be where it is if it wasn't for Chris. I'm going to be honest. Chris is a very modest guy. He's very kind. But I appreciate you and everything you do. And I appreciate you taking the time to do this with us today.
Thanks, man. No problem. It's been my pleasure. Great to meet you, Brian.
Yes.
Brian with an I.
Nice meeting you guys. Thank you.